Hello YouTube, Tim here. We've got another core for a Manchu bow going right now, and you might remember this. I started to make a reinforced core. It was going to be for a Sipahi war bow, but I found I made the core 2 to maybe 4 inches shorter than I wanted it to be. That would probably not have been a good thing. I wasn't able to really successfully make a bow of 42 overall inch knock-to-knock length. It had to be a little bit longer than that for the Sipahi war bow that I sent to Nick. So what we're going to do here is use the same core, because it's the same size as the Manchu bow's core. And I'm going to go ahead and stick these in each side, these nice siyahs that I made. They're poplar. They are... The idea is, from this point, if I insert them to this point, that'll leave a little over 10 inches exposed on each side. So the full length is about 1 foot from tip to tip. However, I only want about 10 inches exposed. For a 40-inch core, that means this should be a 60-inch bow. My other bow was 56 inches, so this should be 4 inches longer, but it should also be considerably more rigid due to the inner reinforcing pipe. And if you're curious about the exact size and dimensions of that, I made a video inserting a 3/4 inch pipe into a 1 inch pipe a while ago. I'll try and find that and I'll put that in the show notes. So, let's get down to business. What we're going to do here is, first of all, insert the siyahs. Then we can start to correct the twist in the limbs, put in a little bit of deflex, and make sure that the ends are sufficiently reflexed. I think if they're going to sit flat, then I might not need to do any reflex at the end like I did with the other one. That also ate up a little bit of space, really, because I had to insert the siyahs further than I'd like to get them to brace against the walls. But that's where we are. Let's go ahead and first weigh them, because I know when I started with this, the entire 4-foot long section of poplar was 445 grams. That's just shy of a pound, half ounce shy of a pound. So cut that into 4 sections, it's a 1/4 pound initially. However, I've removed quite a bit. So let's see what these siyahs weigh now. 53 grams. 53 grams. Wow. And I still need to cut, I just have the nocks cut as references. I didn't actually finish them, but that's enough just to get started. So let's assume that this is going to be about 52, 53 grams for each of these siyahs. That's not half bad. Let's go and heat the pipe and start to insert it. The initial insertion should be fairly simple because this is just normal 1-inch pipe here at the end. The problem is going to be more heating this gently so we can introduce a deflex mid-limb. And then also put in the reflex to the handle. This is going to be a lot of fun though, I think. Let's get cracking. See, we're not at full power, we're about 2/3, 3/4 power. That's fine. There's no sense in going too fast. I like doing little curlicues or figure eights, and I always try and heat the flat sides first. If you concentrate too much heat at the ends, you do risk splitting it, although I find those risks are substantially lessened. A, if the pipe is at room temperature, not freezing from being outdoors, and 2, if it's a larger pipe. Smaller pipes tend to be the worst, absolute worst for this. A 1/2-inch pipe is very easy to overheat. There's just not that much material. 1-inch pipe is substantially thicker, and there's just a lot more material to work with. Okay, I sense we're getting some softening. So now I'm going to start hitting the sides. This is a really good place to start. Let's just grab one of them, insert it up to the point we wanted, so 1 inch inside. Then I want to try and pinch it forward and back. The sides won't be in contact quite as much, but that's alright. I'm more concerned about the back and the front supporting each other here. So I'm not trying to line it up with the other limb as much as I am just with the handle here. If I can get the handle. The other thing is, I plan on removing these and then gluing them back in. That will add a few grams, but believe me, better safe than sorry. You don't want to see it coming out in the middle of use. Since they are tapered, rather torpedo-like, fat at the ends and thinner as you go up, in theory it would hold itself in, because pulling itself out would just should help it grip tighter. But again, let's not push our luck. Alright, so far so good. That looks very good. I'm very satisfied. We'll have plenty of opportunity to tweak this and play with it later. Now let's do the exact same thing for the other side. As you can tell, if I left it like this, that would introduce how much reflex? I mean, we're talking about 8-9 inches of reflex for a fairly short bow. I mean, this is not a long bow by any stretch of the imagination. While a 60-inch bow, I have known them to take reflex of up to that amount. They've always had that as a reflex in the handle and not more as reflex or recurve near the siyahs. So I'd be very concerned about this bow surviving. It may work just fine, but not something I'd care to try. Yeah, that looks very straight down the limb from the handle. Now we need to do this. We're going to have to eventually, like I said, correct. While we add reflex in the handle, we're going to have to correct things there too. This is going to be just a lovely bow. To make sure that I get it just right, because I eyeballed the amount that I inserted it on this siyah. Let's just line them up together, and then I can mark exactly where it was inserted to on the other siyah. If you're thinking ahead and you want to, you can do that ahead of time, of course. But this just gives us a nice index point. Here we go. Let's do the other side now. The other Manchu bow at 28 inches drew approximately 52 pounds. I'm very satisfied with that weight. However, if I could draw, say 80 pounds, I suspect the bow would perform even better. Well, of course, I mean, the more weight you store, theoretically, the more powerful the bow will be. Now, efficiency is a whole nother matter. But a bow can afford to be less efficient when you're storing lots more energy. I do think we could have taken these siyahs even thinner, but I don't feel like pushing my luck since I don't know what the ultimate draw weight of the bow is going to be. Once we figure that out, we can always go back and trim them down as needed. Like I say, curly cues, try and avoid the edges. Okay. Starting to round, so then I usually go to the end and just hit it like that. Shoot into the pipe. ready to do it. Okay, pinching to try and keep the back in contact with the siyah, and I like it. This is looking very good so far. Alignment is excellent. It's been inserted just the right amount. The angle is something that I can tweak later again. I believe I've inserted it at the right angle, but until I go and I actually examine it, and I'll show you how I do that, I won't be sure. What I do is I use my countertop, and I just set the bow down on the countertop on the tips, and then I check to see if the body of the bow is parallel to the surface of the countertop, or the table, or the floor, etc. So if it is, you know you've done a good job. If it's not, then you know you need to adjust somewhere. And if you do that at each stage, do it here when we create the tips, or when we reflex the tips, do it when we reflex the handle. If you do it at each stage, you should end up with something that's perfectly even. And assuming the limbs are tapered the same, and everything else is the same, you really should have a fairly nice, even, symmetrical bow. Just looking at it, looks pretty good. Here, let's see if I can... There's no real counter space for me to show you what I'm talking about, so I'll have to do that later. But that's alright, I think you get the idea. Now I'm going to take a short break, come back, and make sure that we have all the limbs aligned with the handle and that everything's straight and true. I think we have just a very small alignment issue here, but this is looking good so far. Welcome back. I've checked by holding this up against the counter like so, like that. It is basically perfect as far as the amount of reflex, the angle. It's almost perfectly 45 degrees on either side. What is not perfect is the angle, like that, the lateral angle. Take a look there. You can, I think if you look at it, I'm trying to put it right down the lens. It's the best angle for you there. It's just a tiny bit out of alignment. It looks to me just a tiny bit like it's flopped over this way. So I'm going to twist it just a few degrees to get it right in alignment. To do that, we're just heating right at the base. Usually, if you're doing it like this, about 3 revolutions is all you're going to need to soften the PVC to the point where you can deform it. If that doesn't work, stop, go back, and try it again with just another revolution. Okay, so that might be enough. Let's take a look. Okay, see what I have to do? Grabbing it. Trying to twist it. Let's see if that did anything. I'm not convinced that I actually did anything there. That might be a touch better. One more quick blast and let's just finish the job. PVC bows are a lot more forgiving with misalignments than real bows, but highly reflexed bows in general, you do want to be really careful with. You may think they're your friend, but they're under so much tension that they can really turn into your enemy quick. Okay, let's see, did that work? I'm looking down the limb, and it looks pretty close to perfect. It's going to hold it under a tiny bit of tension for a second now. And let's look at it. That looks great to me. Okay, super. I'm just going to check to see that it's still the same height that it was. Looks like I took a tiny bit of reflex out. I'm going to add that back just by pulling it now. And we're good. This side is totally set. Now that side needs to have the same thing done, but let's check first. It might be pretty close to perfect. And I see about the same problem. It looks to me like it's a little bit canted to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and just try and fix that. Well, yeah, it's really darn close. That's the thing. These things aren't off by that much. Just by a teensy bit. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's fix the center and then check it again. Sometimes that'll make it easier to see. So right now, yes, we can do that on here. I'm going to try and do two things at once. We're going to be twisting to correct the straightness of the bow, and we're also going to be adding reflex at the center of the bow at the same time. Not a huge amount. And since you're heating such a small area, it should happen fairly quickly, about a minute. Although, because I have this thing double stuffed, so to speak, this might take longer. So I'm going to actually scale the heat back a tiny bit. And just take this nice and easy. Rotate it a little bit faster, just like a animal on a skewer. The outer pipe might be near burning if you heat it too quickly, while the inner pipe is almost completely solid. So you do have to be very careful. Take it a little slower than usual, back the heat off, heat it from a little farther away. And so that estimate of about a minute, that was optimistic. I had forgotten this thing was so full of PVC. The outer pipe is definitely hot. So just take it nice and easy, let that heat soak in. And the inner pipe will slowly heat up. Once that happens, we'll be ready to go. Now that is going to be the same problem that we'll experience when we're trying to add deflex in the limbs. Normally this is a very quick, easy process, but given the constraints of the inner pipe, this is going to be a little bit more complicated. And if we don't add deflex, remember, this just isn't going to work already. I mean, there's so much reflex in the limb, I wouldn't have very much confidence the bow would survive. It might, but it might not. Why risk it? Performance is all we're concerned with. And adding a little deflex to a reflexed bow is not the end of the world. Almost every modern recurve bow is deflexed. At least I mean that in the sense that their limbs are attached to the main body of the bow in an angle, a rearward angle, bellyward. Okay, that looks good. That looks really good. So now let's just make sure it's straight. I'm looking down, I'm sighting down the limbs to line the tips with the handle and the tips with the tips. It is challenging, but looks good. Looks very good. Yeah, see what I mean? We don't need an extraordinary reflex here. Just about that. That's perfect. Just enough to give it character and curve. Okay, now the bow would absolutely fail. There's no question about it. You could not string, let alone use this bow. Okay, you might get it strung, I'll give you that. But I have doubts about that, and attempting to draw it would almost certainly produce a failure. So, again, being stuffed full of 2 pipes, this is going to cool slower than your average bow. You can cool the outside with cool water. Let me go do that right now. I'm going to run it under some cool water. And it feels solid at this point because the outer core is solid. But don't forget, the inner is probably still ripping hot. And some of that heat will come back, and it could even re-soften up the outer core. So just take your time. If you really want to cool it off fast, you can run it under water for a longer period of time. Just don't worry too much. Try and get it as straight as you can at this stage, because this is really going to be critical later on. Okay. I'm just going to run that under a little bit of cold water again. Yeah, like I said, a way that you could do that, either just leave it in the sink running the water, or get a bucket or a tub of water, or fill the sink with water and just let it sit in there. That'll cool it off very quickly. So I'm going to take another little break, come back, and then we will do the deflexes in the limbs, and that's going to be the most challenging part, I think. But once we're done, we'll be able to sort of see the bow, see how it's coming and how it's looking. I'd like the finished brace height to be 7 inches, whereas the other one was about 6. And I'd like this one to pull more. I'd really like this to pull at least 70 pounds. But again, who knows? We'll have to wait and see.